A very good morning to all of you. Thank you very much for taking time to register and logged in to this live discussion jointly organized by ITX360 and Koba Supply Chain on the topic Role of Technology in a Resilient Supply Chain. My name is Danushka. I head the logistics technology business at ITX360. I have my colleague on the other side, all the way from Australia. Jamie, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Hello here from Australia. It's currently 3 p.m. here. It's a beautiful day, and I'm looking forward to being with you all virtually. Been working closely with ITX for some time now, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they've put together for this webinar and on how to build a resilient supply chain on these unprecedented times. I will hand it over to Danushka. I'll let him take it away, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining. I know there's a bit of a global audience, so I look forward to continuing this. Take it away, Danushka.
Thanks, Jamie. Staff shortages, restrictions in logistics, changes in our buying patterns. So these are the things that we hear these days in our supply chains. So are we ready to face all these new things and disruptions? This COVID-19 situation, this disruption put our lives and our businesses in a very different and difficult spot. We have to take care of ourselves, our health, our families, and our staff. And at the same time, we have to think of continuing our businesses and running our companies and continuing the revenue streams. So the best thing that we can do these days is come together, learning from each other, getting into collective strategies and moving forward. So looking at the objectives that we want to cover in this live discussion today, we as a team, are experts in supply chain technology. So we want to share some insights on what are the risks and challenges taking place for a supply chain and how to withstand those disruptions, and also how to build a resilient supply chain and the use of technological tools in terms of building and giving more power to your supply chain. Today, we live in the most complex and the interdependent and interconnected ecosystem of our entire human history. So the new organizational leadership everywhere have to master this strategic agility to build this risk resilience around our businesses, as again around our supply chains as well. So what is the supply chain risk? So these are the risks or challenges associated with any component of the supply chain, which will in return disrupt our business. So this includes the suppliers, the shipments, the raw material shortages, operations, your warehouses, your transportation, your projects. It could be anything if you will find in your stream of supply chain. This risk and these challenges in the supply chain are not something very new to the world. I mean, if you look at the past few decades, that there are enough and more the risk events took place around the world, ranging from environmental to economic and even technological risks, which actually put all our supply chains at a standstill and affected a lot. So words like Irma, Katrina, Harvey, so it's all sounds like very beautiful girls' names, but they are not. They are all horrific, geographical catastrophes took place in USA. If you take into 2017 itself in USA, so like these 5 disruptions took place, which actually completely damaged the supply chains in the USA, which took weeks and months to recover, and they had to face incur billions of dollars in losses. Jamie, if you want to add some more points on this about the global perspective, it'd be great.
Yeah, I think thanks, Danushka. I think if we look at the USA, I mean, they're having their challenges like every other nation globally. I think an example here we're having in Australia has typically been a historically slow adopter to e-commerce. And part of that was people like to go out and have the experience of going to the bricks and mortar. And when this COVID kicked in, which is not a sexy girl's name by any means of the imagination, there was a there was a sprint. There was a sprint to A, ensure business continuity, B, meet the demand, and with that came a large cost. So what we saw here in Australia, for example, is companies couldn't afford to make the sprint to upscale in time, and therefore went backwards. Companies could afford to make the sprint and scaled up rapidly and are doing very well. I use an example as well in the United Kingdom. Tesco's, who are a large grocery retailer, I think we've probably all heard of them somewhere, some form or another. Although they were able to maintain the demand, their business profit dropped because they took the mentality of throwing people at the problem. And although they grew substantially, they didn't make money for it. They're actually running at a loss now. So these different things that we don't take into account are now coming back, and these are some of the impacts which we can talk about later on.
Yep, thanks, Jay. So then after all that, in 2020, now here we are, the Black Swan of 2020 with the COVID-19. So this is something very new to all of us, this kind of a situation. So maybe if you take our generations, maybe of the people that connected in this call as well, maybe we all are facing this kind of a situation for the first time. So most of us are not ready to to how to handle and to get some idea about how it was handled earlier. But however, from this incident, what we understood that all the businesses, actually it was forced to relook at and reimagine the way that we do businesses and the way we run our supply chains. So it was widely discussed in the global arena as well. If you take the CEO message, Nestle CEO's message for the COVID-19, he has given a very prominent place for the supply chain. So he is saying that all the businesses in the world has to get ready for this storm of the supply chain challenges as a result of this disruption. So it has come to as a kind of an epicenter of all the business and disruptions taking place in the supply chain as a result of this COVID-19. So what are these challenges that we are facing? If we put it in a very very high level, looking at it in a very holistic way, so it's forcing us to do limited global trade. The country borders being closed down. There are no productions taking place in factories due to raw material shortages, and customer demand is skyrocketing. For certain products, the demand cannot even cope, but for some products, there's no demand at all, and lack of human resources to carry out the operations, obviously because it's a health threat. And you cannot stop your work, what you're doing in your supply chains, and you have to bring in new people, the fresh people in to do all this work. And how are you going to upskill those people? Are you equipped to upskill those people immediately, or is it going to take weeks and months to upskill? And distribution channels are completely broken. Even if you have the products to sell, you don't know how to send it to the customer because your channels are broken. And different, as Jamie said, new buying patterns have emerged in the market. The consumers who never even touched the mobile phone or the internet to buy even a single piece of product, now buying their entire grocery list and all their family needs on the internet. So are the businesses are ready, and are we equipped as supply chains to handle this sudden demand and this sudden change of the supply chain patterns? Many companies are struggling. So why this struggle with this disruption? So if you look at it in a very high level, the decade-long focus on the supply chain optimization that many companies looked at is purely, probably, mainly looked at minimizing the cost. So they put minimal focus on the technological investments and not even aware about the vulnerabilities that they had in their supply chain and the rigid supply chain networks. So Jamie, if you also can add some points over here, it will be great.
Yeah, no, thank you, Danushka. Yeah, I think you alluded to a very strong point there, which was cost and investment in supply chain. I think it's all fair to say, guys, especially those that come from a 3PL or third-party logistics environment, that the market is so saturated and so competitive that really margin takes precedence over anything, and large with that comes larger risk to the business. So those minimal focuses on the technology investment you talk about are certainly coming through the cracks. Another issue we were struggling with the COVID-19, I think it's fair to say, is we have an expression, all your eggs in one basket. We had all our resourcing in one area, or all our demand or all our supplies was coming from one region. Once a lockdown happened, the portfolio wasn't diversified enough to ensure consumer demand. And I use an example here with a current customer of mine in Australia, who's a third-party logistics provider. They specify specifically in the white goods market. They're a leading white goods 3PL provider, and one of their largest customers, a European customer, and they actually took the customer's customer took the opportunity to increase their inventory because all of their product came from Europe and Latin America, and they flooded the market with their own products, raised the prices because they couldn't get product out of China. So, excuse me, beg your pardon. A lot of those organizations who had all their eggs in the greater China basket were heavily impacted. So I think it's time as well. It's a good thing to look at diversifying the regional and destination portfolio of where product comes from and how we assemble and how we get the goods from A to B, and maybe throw in a C there as well as a contingency.
Yeah. So I think we can get, there's another example, I think in Korea, about the leading car manufacturer who had to close down 7 of their factories because they are not given that the attention to the supply mix, that they were completely depending on few suppliers coming for certain product coming from Hubei province, and they had to close down all the factories, which costed billions of dollars during the last 2 months. Yeah,
I think. Sorry, Danushka.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, I think another thing to add to that is we're seeing a trend of 3PLs and supply chain organizations partnering. So I use a quote here that a friend of mine said to me, unrelated to supply chain, but very much related to COVID, was the strongest currency in the world right now is collaboration. And take a minute to think about that and what the extent of that means. Really, it means that you can't have 100% focus on yourself. You need to have those contingencies to collaborate and partner with sometimes your competitors, or sometimes we call them frenemies, to ensure that you can deliver the goods based on the demand, or most of it. I mean, we all know there was a toilet paper shortage globally. That was nothing to do with the manufacturing, right? The manufacturing, and the reason I say that is Kerber is one of the largest manufacturing of toilet paper machinery globally. Manufacturing was still going. It was the supply chain couldn't keep up with the demand. So it's time to everyone needs to review and sit and look, do we need to outsource or semi-outsource some of our portfolio here to ensure that there's a contingency plan in place?
Right. So the resilient supply chain, the supply chain resilience, that's a word now came out many times. So now we are moving into the topic area. So what we really understand about what is this supply chain resilience? If we put it in a very simple form, this is the ability of a supply chain to both resist or fight the disruption, and also to recover operational and logistics capability after a disruption. This is called fighting it back and bounce back to your normal state. So the resilient supply chain in nature, if you have built this power in your supply chain, it comes definitely with benefits. So it will give you this nimble in the supply chain, that the flexibility and the agility to your supply chain for rapid decision making, and be ahead of the competition even at the times of difficulties. And it will allow you to have interconnected logistics and uninterrupted communication and data flow, and the collaboration across the supply chain, even during a time of disruption, and even you don't have human resources actually even in presence in your supply chain, and bounce back fast post disruption. So these are some of the key benefits that if you have built this power into the supply chain. So I look at it, I see it in like in a framework where if we build these 4 components into your supply chain, that we could bring this power into your supply chain as resilience. So this is basically if you can build the visibility into your supply chain, and if you can build flexibility into your supply chain, And if you have the collaboration among all your stakeholders in the supply chain, and you have the control to take care, to make sure that all these workflows are working well. So if you take it one by one in a nutshell, this visibility, what we look at it is the track and monitor all the supply chain events and your task and the patterns that enabling you to take proactive actions. So this could be the visibility about your suppliers, your carriers, your other stakeholders in your supply chain, the demand patterns of your end user. Do you have the visibility of all the inventories of your warehouses? Do you know what's taking place in your operational supply chain? The visibility in your transport management about your user consumption levels. So, it's a holistic view of your entire supply chain. Have you built the tools and the strategies in your supply chain to get this visibility? And then the other component we see is the flexibility. How quickly you can adapt your supply chain for a new way of doing the business, or a new way of running your supply chain without significantly increasing the operational cost and your resources. This is like maybe adding new process altogether, bringing, suddenly you want to move into the e-commerce and you want to sell everything online. And ability to your reroute your materials, and you're changing your suppliers, and changing your entire raw materials inflow stream. So are you flexible to do that immediately? Is your supply chain framework is fixed in such a way to do that? And then one of the key areas is the collaboration. This is about developing the synergetic and the trust-based relationships with all the stakeholders and the partners of your supply chain in your network, in your value stream. So this could be the collaborative planning among your suppliers and your other service providers. I mean, are you planning your supply chain and you do everything on your own, and you are just telling your stakeholders to follow that? Or else is it a collective effort of all the stakeholders in your supply chain? All right, and do you have access to end-to-end supply chain inventory? If you are especially running a global supply chain, this is what we call the network inventory. Do you know what are the problems your suppliers are facing? What are the problems your the other service providers are facing? Do you have that collaboration with those people? And then with all that, you need to build in the control on top of all these components, which are the impose adequate regulatory, legal, and the social compliance and the policies to control all these tasks and all these components, and make sure uninterrupted data flow and uninterrupted business. So to arrive at this, to build this resilient supply chain. So I know that there are so many other strategies, supply chain strategies that you need to follow. There are so many strategies, but among all those strategies, technological tools is also playing a very big, kind of a vital role in building this resilient supply chain. So these technological tools that in our this live discussion, we are taking it in 3 areas, 3 components. So number one area being is we are going to little discuss about the technological enablers for the, if you are especially running a global supply chain. Are you still running your IT infrastructure with your legacy, your on-prem infrastructure? Or do you already have your cloud strategy, or are you cloud ready? The cloud enables you to make quick decisions, communicate effectively, and run smoothly. It will give you the scalability, immediacy, and flexibility. So what is this scalability? So just imagine that you want to suddenly enhance and increase your computing power to power up your supply chain in a time of this disruption by bringing in new tools and running your new business models and all that. So are you able to do that with, if you are running just legacy hardware in your business or in your supply chain? Yeah, probably you will not to bring that scalability instantly. So good example that I can bring here about the Alibaba Cloud in China. So during this the COVID-19 situation, what Alibaba Cloud did, so they opened their cloud computing power and all the algorithms that they have developed to the market, where especially for the companies running the medical services and the supply chains, where they utilize all this computing power and the algorithms to do all the data analysis of all the tests they are doing and all the demands that supply chain people are fulfilling, where it took almost few weeks earlier. With that computing power which Alibaba gave them, they managed to do it in 30 minutes. So that is the scalability and the power that you can bring in if you are running your supply chain tools on the cloud. And then the immediacy. How fast you could bring in new tools and new softwares into your system. Is it going to take months, or can you do it in days or weeks? And about the flexibility. Suddenly you want to do everything from home. You want to extend the power of your supply chain, but all the workflows and the systems of your supply chain to the operational staff on the field, or maybe to your drivers. How flexible you are to do that. And then about the collaboration and the integration part, especially if you are running a global supply chain. So if you are going to collaborate with hundreds of suppliers around the world, integrating their data streams, integrating their systems, getting a centralized data flow. If you are running your supply chain on the cloud, all these things are going to be much smoother. So with the cloud, the next product comes into play is the cloud supply chain management platforms. So especially if you are running a global supply chain, imagine a situation if you can manage everything from your purchase order up to the settlement on a single platform. From your procurement to delivery, you manage everything on a single platform. Your hundreds of suppliers from maybe 30, 50 different countries, your hundreds of carriers, your shipping lines, your airlines, your freight forwarders, your banks, your insurance companies, everyone is working in a single platform, sharing all the details, all the information on a single platform. And the supply chain owner of that company, or that company who runs the supply chain, can have a holistic view of the entire supply chain on a single platform. How smooth it's going to be. Even in a case of a disruption, these workflows and these the supply chain is going to work, because that it's not going to be broken, because it's all digitally managed on the cloud and on the platform. So this is the birth of the control tower. But maybe some of y'all have heard about the control tower. It is like a control tower. You manage everything, pinpoint what is taking place in the supply chain, and making sure that your supply chain is working very well. So this is the birth of the control tower, the concept. So, and we call it the single version of truth, or maybe we call it the Facebook of the supply chain industry, where everyone is working on a single platform. And then with that, we are moving into the digitized shipping documents in the global trade. So these are all components which we could bring power into the supply chain. So are you still running on your paper? So I know there are restrictions in many countries, including our country. There are restrictions to do with digital documentation, digital signatures, But with this COVID-19 disruption, many countries and many companies, including Sri Lanka, they realize that using the physical paper, wet signatures, seals, sending people to collect these documents, printing of documents, it's not going to work even even during normal business conditions, especially during the disruption that you cannot do it. You will have an uninterrupted information flow and data flow and your document flow, even without the presence of a human staff in your office, if you have all these digital shipping documents in place. And if you want to move one step ahead, you can actually go into putting all this documentation into the next buzzword in the market is which is the blockchain. So blockchain is something, it's more secure cloud, where you are going to place all your documents in all your transactional data in the blockchain, where it will give you much more security, decentralized nature, and ability for you to retrieve and trace it anytime you want. So we as a company, we also provide these kind of services to the market. I know, especially on the blockchain and the digitized shipping documents, and also on the digitalizing the shipping documents and not only shipping, any document in your office environment. I can actually take a good example during this disruptive situation, a good case study from the freight forwarding industry, where a lot of documents are in use for the operations. With the use of technology, with the use of OCR, machine learning, and robotic process automation, without the presence of the humans, very minimal presence of the human resources, you manage to do all your invoicing, the settlements, and your data retrieving and entering with all these technologies in place. So then I'm coming to the next area of the technological enablers. So Jamie, you can take it over from here.
Thanks, Danushka. So as Danushka mentioned, a lot of your resilient supply chain is technology, and having that end-to-end, right from manufacturer to end delivery point, albeit B2C or B2B, you want to have that visibility and control, and you want to ensure it's fluid, right? So I think it's important to, Danushka, if you can flip slides, sorry, my internet's going very slow.
I have given you the control. I have given you the control.
Oh, sorry. Okay, perfect. It's painfully slow on my side. I do apologize. Excuse me. So, as I was saying, I think a very core component of this is your WMS. What does the operation look like within the four walls of your business? Sorry, you're receiving, you're picking, your inventory control. How efficient is that? How flexible is that? So a lot of businesses we know all run omni-channel. A lot of our businesses here in Australia in particularly is about 10% e-com with about between 85 and 90% bricks and mortar, like I mentioned earlier. Now that's been turned on its head. We've seen some businesses grow 320% with their e-com, and obviously their brick and mortar shrunk substantially. What was the challenge there? Well, their e-com side of the business wasn't equipped for such an aggressive growth on such a short space of time, right? And there's two areas of that. There was the warehouse layout. The warehouse layout didn't accommodate the new throughputs. Pack stations, postal carriers couldn't handle the demand. Integrations were failing. But second to that was a resourcing point of view. They had to bring in a lot of casual resources to maintain to keep up with the demand, and part of the struggle there was onboarding a resource into the business. So I'd be intrigued to get feedback here from the different attendees, and when onboarding someone into their business, what's their time? Excuse me. So as this went on, we noticed that, hey, businesses were falling behind because they would bring in 20, 30, 40 casual staff members, but it took them a week to get trained, right? There was no easily onboard learning management system. So to have a WMS there that is very easy to use from the user experience perspective, was able to, excuse me, was able to manage the new load, right? The different style of picking, the new load and new volumes coming through, to efficiently allocate the resources accordingly, to ensure your inventory is kept well. I mean, you don't want to have this going against your bottom line, right? You want your actionable insights. So what is an actionable insight? I don't know if everyone on this call knows what that is. So an actionable insight is having the data presented to you and being able to drill through that data to action a task or an execution, rather than juggling between data and user experience. Having something that's there and you can drill through on one user experience. Supporting the end-to-end visibility. So as Danushka previously mentioned, ensuring that your full supply chain is integrated and those integrations are seamless, and they were able to adapt to the changes that we went through. And then again is the integration of different channels. So what does that mean? So integration to your host, integration to your TMS, integration to your postal carriers. Is the CSV way of integrating, is that a resilient way of doing it? Personally, no, I don't think so. I think there's more efficient ways of doing it. So really a review of your integration to your various channels. So when that's if we look at that from a WMS point of view, and ensuring that you have a strong WMS that can manage this, the onboarding perspective, the data availability, the visibility, the nimbleness, as Danushka mentioned earlier, I like that word, and gives you the ability to be more agile to the market conditions, right? And I'm going to use a bit of a cliche here. You're not setting the you're not following the trends, you're setting the trend, right? And by that stage, you're in front of that curve. Sorry. RF, mobility. I think mobility, as we mentioned a couple of times. So transactional tracking everything via a computer, right? With the likes of RFID, which does need end-to-end adoption from manufacturer really to not consumer, but to end fulfillment, ensuring that's rapid way of tracking and inventory controlling your business. Track your inventory from end to end within the four walls. So the movement of your inventory, ensuring your stock integrity. Remember, that's all on the bottom line, right? So you got to ensure that that's at 99.99%. Otherwise, the increase in volume, the increase in picking, increased areas, that hits your bottom line, right? And you want to make it easy. You want to make your order fulfillment easy for your operators, right? You don't want to overcomplicate it. There's a US Navy term called KISS. I don't know if everyone's heard of it. Keep it simple, stupid, right? To keep it easy, ensure that when you're onboarding and bringing on these new employees to manage your demand, that they're not spending a week consumed in a training room learning how to do it. They're able to log in, half-day induction, and away they go. Okay. We can take it a step further from RF. We see, especially here in Australia, our labor costs are substantially, extremely expensive, and our margins are extremely low. So, one thing that we see very heavily is voice technology. And people say, is voice really as efficient as it is? Well, yes, it is. You think about it. You're not having to set down an RF device to pick a box every time you scan. You can validate on the move. Your dialogue's on the move. It's safer. You have full visibility. Your eyes are free. Your hands are free. We see some ROIs on voice up to 6 months. Voice is actually dialogue driven, so you're told what to do. It's the follow the bouncing ball approach. Again, going back to that efficiency and accuracy, but also onboarding time to bring on those new resources, right? And then, excuse me, I've got a dry throat. And then if we augment that we augment that process with automation, as Danushka mentioned earlier, we have some robotics, AMRs, that we now see a trend in robots following pickers. So in this image, you can see a guy picking. This could be picked to a robot, which then takes the goods away, and another robot pulls up in a tote or a pallet. So you're substantially reducing that travel time. It's full-blown picking end to end from a shift. A lot of travel time is a lot of picking is wasted. 70% travel time. The actual motion is 30%. So if you're able to eliminate all that and really free up hands, free up eyes, and free up having to drive a forklift, there's a lot of productivity gains to be had there. Again, remember, all that efficiency saving and throughput straight to the bottom line. And then one of the newer technologies on the market, unfortunately, we don't see much of it in Australia just yet because of we have a very red tape nation, very risk adverse and very safety centric. But augmented reality, you're really following the bouncing line or the bouncing ball here, using your eyes and sight from a forklift perspective, picking, inventory control. You're able to see the direction augmented on your screen. Now, this is new to us in Australia. It's very few and far between, but we are seeing upticks of such technologies in the Middle East and parts of Southeast Asia as well. And then providing a TMS. So we talked about the four walls. Now we got to look at what happens when it leaves the four walls. So you need to have visibility into that cargo right to the very end, right? So having a TMS that's integrated and sits on the same platform or user experience or common container as your WMS ensures that you have that full visibility once it leaves your business, right? You're able to track your trucks, see where the delivery is. There's technologies out there that even your subcontracting to transportation companies can be tracked. Making sure you have the PODs, the proof of deliveries, electronic. If you think about it from a green perspective, reducing that paper cost, reducing your freight costs. You have everything centralized in one common container. You're trying to eliminate that manual work. So the full integrations, right? So having a solution there or a curated solution that's all contained within your common container, it means for less manual work. And then your end-to-end visibility, which I think we've spoken about it numerous times today. E-com and the last mile capability. So this is where we've seen the boom. Danushka mentioned that people who would never have bought e-com or purchased online before have now been forced to purchase. And I use that loosely. We have seen a generational shift here. A lot of generations or older people who would not have used e-com historically are now forced to use e-com, albeit buy your wine or buy your groceries or your toilet paper. So the large increase there, and again, businesses haven't been able to sustain the demand and the change and the shift. Wine, for example, picking and packing of wine, the difficulties in picking and packing wine and ensuring that it's safe and ensuring that it doesn't get damaged throughout. These are all very minor things we don't take into account, but are impacting, right? So if we look at the graph here, we look at our cloud solution that Danushka talked about. So within Kerber or HighJump, we have our HighJump One cloud solution, and we provide bespoke support solutions to other ERPs. So that sitting on the common cloud container ensures your scalability. You're able to upscale when you're able to upscale when e-commerce volumes increase. You're not having to buy a new server, to reinstall an instance, etc. You're able to do that with really automatically as a cloud environment sees an increase in volume, it scales up automatically. And then if we go through the flow here, you've got your fulfillment flexibility. So what's flexibility? I think that's an important word. We throw it around a lot without much to back it up. So what I will say is, with flexibility within the WMS or software is able to change and be nimble in the current conditions. What does that mean? So having true ownership of your own solution and being able to make those changes yourself, right? Having the tools in front of you to change your integrations, to build your integrations, to change your flows, to change your screens, to add new screens. A lot of software vendors are very what we call services centric. They sell services, not software, right? And with that means any changes you want to make have to go through a software vendor. Going through a software vendor means you're at their mercy. What does that mean? You're at their timeline. You're at their priority. You pay them to then be told when you can get it. So having that flexibility within your solution suite and allowing you to do such means, hey, you don't have to wait on other organizations. You don't have to wait on your vendors. You can do this yourself. Space optimization, I mentioned, the ability to scale up automatically. Inventory management, your seamless WMS and ERP integrations to ensure that everything's in sync. Operational visibility, so having the data in front of you, like I mentioned earlier, with actionable insights to make a decision on the fly, on the spot. You're not having to wait for reports to run and generate. You have that through your business intelligence tool contained on the cloud within the WMS. Your seamless data flow, your end-to-end integrations, ensuring that everything is efficiently integrated. And then your multiple transport vendors. So is there a shipping solution that needs to sit in here as well? Are you using multiple solutions or multiple shippers? So for example, we have Ozpost, Toll, DHL, TNT, you might have heard of some. We have multiple. Is it worthwhile building out an integration to each of them, or should you look at getting a shipping component that sits in between your solution and them? These are all things that you considered and a lot of organizations didn't consider. Danushka, is that over to you now?
Yes. Hi, Jamie. Before moving into the next area, I would like to tell the audience that our question line is open. If you have any questions, you can actually post them on our question line.
All right, Danushka, I'm still in control.
Okay, yeah. Right. So the other area of technological enablers that I would like to take it in a kind of on the data, because we all know the data has become the new fuel in our supply chain. So the actionable insights and how we are going to have these actionable insights with the use of data. And this data definitely going to power up our supply chains to build this the resilience. So the big data in the supply chain. So are you still depending, as Jamie said, on the data coming out from the four walls of your company? Is it only the data coming from your own sources? Do you have access to all the data coming from all the other stakeholders and even from the outside market? So here, I'm not actually telling that with big data or with data that you can predict when the next pandemic going to take place. It is not. So with the right amount of data and the right technological tools, companies can use this big data to actually help navigate the supply chain risk, visualizing it, intelligent planning, understanding what are the global risk incidents took place, looking at the historical data and learning from those incidents, and then predicting the future rather than being reactive and firefighting when it comes to a challenge, that you are going to be ready. So this is the power that you get with big data. Big data, another buzzword comes out is the Internet of Things, the IoT. So for the benefit of the audience, if I touch a little bit on the IoT, what it stands for and what is it about. So these are all about the sensors. The sensors fixed into machines and to people and to different environments, and in return connected to the internet. It gives you uninterrupted data about the way it operates and the environment around them, even without the presence of humans. Right? This builds the interconnection between the machine data and the humans. It will make your supply chains more responsive and more informative. And I can take a good example with IoT, the use of IoT in this time of disruption. It's a leading beverage company from Europe. During a time like this, not many companies can forecast their demands and tell what's going to be the demand patterns of the consumers, because it's everywhere. You cannot predict it. By this company having IoT enabled vending machines placed in many crowded places, in not crowded, you cannot get crowded in the places where, like the supermarkets and in different places that where you have the consumers coming in. So this company managed to track and trace the demand patterns of these users, and in return give that demand data automatically to the planning systems to fulfill these vending machines, which they had an interrupted material flow into these vending machines where all the customers were satisfied who wanted the products. So it's a good example. And another area that, with in a situation like this, there can be a lot of incidents, the claims that you must be working with new suppliers. You want to track, if you are sending food items, you want to see what are the temperature levels of the food I am sending out. How am I going to track that? Because you need to worry about different other areas rather than calling the people and getting the temperature data. So if you have these sensors already fixed in your supply chain, even in a time like this, as I said, your data connection and your data inflow is uninterrupted. Even if you want to go for insurance claim for some incident, those data will be available somewhere because it was automatically retrieved from the sensors. So the next the technological enabler I would like to touch here on the artificial intelligence and the machine learning sort of components. So using AI, the artificial intelligence in organizations can turn the unstructured but real data into insights. You learn from the historical patterns and you predict the future scenarios. You learn how much of resources that you deployed during the previous disruption for you to take some decision during this disruption. And it's actually about turning your unanticipated into envisioned. That you're not actually waiting and looking at what am I going to do. Your systems and your data will guide you what to do. It's going to be a collective call. Machines and the data and the humans interaction coming into play. So creating these algorithms by analyzing historical similar events, again, like the big data, you can navigate to the disruptive situations in your supply chain. So the supply chains which are technologically sound and more data-driven will ensure high levels of responsiveness and flexibility. So these are like the key components of a resilient supply chain. So along with that, your strategic decisions on your sourcing, your network designing your supply chain infrastructure, your resource plans, and many more supply chain decisions and strategies that you have to follow to build this resilient supply chain. But technology is also one of the key tools, one of the vital components to build this the resilience, or we call the power, into the supply chain. Jamie, you want to add something on this in here?
Sorry, I was still on. Sorry, I was still on mute there. No, I think you've touched on it all. I think the importance of having that decentralized, or not having your eggs and all that in that same basket, ensuring that you have that data visibility and data access, that communication relationship, and then having that frenemy / collaboration with your partners and competitors to ensure that, hey, resilience is there. I think it's fair to say that nobody can claim they were prepared for this. I know some were better prepared, but I think we can try and use this as a learning curve to ensure that we're better prepared next time. I think I was reading an article today from Mars, not Mars a planet, but Mars a food manufacturer, and their philosophy has always been to have manufacturing facilities close to all major regional cities, to ensure that, hey, if one goes down, they can still, and they run at only 70% capacity. So if they need to ramp up to 100% capacity to service other regions, they're able to. So they have a very decentralized supply chain, and it's fully interconnected and integrated.
Yep. Yeah. So we all are marching towards. Yeah. Go ahead, Jimmy. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just sorry. If you're going to continue, I was going to look at some of the questions that were coming through.
Oh yeah. So we can actually move into the questions now, and after that we can finish it off. So I will just go to the final the slide, and after that we can actually move into the questions.
Perfect.
So as a company, the ITX360 and Koba supply chain. So we to the market, even to Sri Lanka and to the regional market, that we provide most of these technologies, and we provide the consultancy and the required tools to build this power into your supply chain. Starting from the warehouse management systems, all the fulfillment technology we discussed about, like the voice technology and the RFID, and all these the technological tools are available, and we have hundreds of use cases we can bring in to educate the markets. And also on the transport management, the system side, again, we have the built softwares to provide you and to give you support to build your resilient supply chains. And also on the blockchain side, the digitizing the documents, digitizing shipping documents, digitizing your supply chain documents. If you are looking at technologies like that to inherent into your supply chain, yes, we have the ability to support you. And even with the blockchain technology, if you want to get into that, we can support you in that as well. Jamie, want to get the perspective of Koba also in here?
Yeah, I'll touch on it briefly. I mean, without coming up on time, and I want to give the crowd a bit of an opportunity to ask some questions. So
that's right.
For those of you who do not know, Kerber Supply Chain is a number three global supply chain technology provider. We provide solutions from WMS, TMS, last mile delivery softwares, pharmaceutical tracking. We also provide bespoke voice solutions, turnkey voice solutions, out-of-the-box voice solutions. If anybody wants to learn more, you can feel free to contact Danushka. But on top of our technology offering or software offering, we also offer automation. So we have various automation businesses, primarily 100% focused on supply chain. That is our domain. That is our expertise. That is where we come from. And so if you need to want to learn more, it's Kerber, Korber supply chain. Yep. You can contact Danushka for any further inquiries. So we'll open it up to the floor now, Danushka.
Yeah, we have some questions. I think the first two questions we have, I think it's already been addressed with it's asking about what is the resilient supply chain, and I think it's already answered in the session. So we have a question on do you think Sri Lankan 3PLs are ready to adopt automation and digitization, considering the fact that it is still a heavily people-packed business? What do you think, Jamie?
Well, Mike, I don't want to answer a question with a question, but I sort of refer back to what I said earlier. Although people packed, why not augment with automation as well, or digitalization? I mean, we're not trying to replace people.
That's right.
But we're trying to make the business more efficient, right? So why not have the ability to maintain or grow, but rather than have to employ 2 full-time equivalents to complete a task, why not employ 1? And you can employ, or you can purchase automation now for, now I use this as a North American example, but you can buy robots for $900 a month USD, right? So if you complement that with an employee who can only work 8 to 12 hours a day, which a robot works 24/7, right? I think the two go together. So I get the question, but I think it depends on how you want to grow and how effectively you want to grow and your throughput of growth as well. And by the way, we see the same challenges in Southeast Asia and Asia, where they're very people-packed organizations, but we see them now coming through with more automation to allow them to grow, not replace people, but to grow the business.
Right, and also like even so people will say that these are all markets with so much of labor, as you know, clearly mentioned on the question as well. But still, even if you have labor, but as a business in Sri Lanka, we find it very difficult to find people to work in the operations, in the logistic operations. So even if it is a labor intensive market and people packed market, but finding the right people is still a challenge. And even, I mean, if you take this situation, you will have a lot of people in country, but people cannot come to work. You still have to run your supply chain. So if you have this digitalization in place and all these technologies and automations in place, you will still run your operations and fulfill the demand. So
yeah, no, that's a very valid point, Danushka. I mean,
yeah.
I hate, when we talk automation, I hate to talk about it during the current pandemic, because I think we have a surplus of labor now.
That's right.
But that doesn't mean to say that automation can't work and complement and synergize with manual labor, right? Yeah, so I hope that answers your question, Felina.
Selina, yeah.
Afraz, you mentioned OCR for data. How does OMR get influenced? Well, OMR and OCR, my understanding is OCR is the character and OMR is the markings and the ticks.
Yeah.
So
it's the same thing, yeah.
They work in conjunction with one another, Afraz. Sorry, we just use OCR as a generic term, but they synergize, they work together. Vignesh, how the 4th industrial revolution is shaping the supply chain industry. Dinesh, could you take that one?
So yeah, we talk the 4th industrial revolution is all about the connected the industry. So that's what you call. So what we all did, all the tools we discussed over here in the presentation as well, it's all about the interconnections, data connections, all the machines and the humans and the operations, everybody is getting connected. So connected infrastructure, that visibility, so that is the way to go. Even I mean, with the supply chain, the 4.0 is marching towards the connected, you know, all the components, like the connected technology, the data. So in the 4th industrial revolution, for us to be linked with the 4th industrial revolution, the supply chains has to be also, as I mentioned at the slide, it has to be the supply chain 4.0, with bringing in all the technology and making it decentralized and connected.
I want to change a little bit. You mentioned industrial revolution. I call this a technology revolution. I think with the uptick in mobility and consumer grade devices, how we treat supply chains are very different. We now have two forms of supply chain. We have our physical supply chain, which is getting goods from A to B in the most efficient manner possible and most safest and whatever. But we also have a digital supply chain, which is what Danushka has been talking about, is the movement of data from A to B efficiently and as quickly as possible, right? To ensure that those consumer expectations are maintained. I mean, one thing I notice is next day delivery or second day delivery. Great, that's an awesome service. That's the physical movement. But people want to see where the truck driver is an hour out from it coming for a delivery. That's the digital movement of goods, right? So that data and having that data visibility through the digital supply chain as well. So right. I'm going to call it a technology revolution.
That's right. So I mean, if I answer it simply for the question, how the fourth industrial revolution is shaping the supply chain industry, it is the supply chain industry is getting shaped with technology because of the fourth industrial revolution. That is what's happening.
Technology and data.
That's right. Jamie, you can take this one. Can you explain a bit more about your WMS?
Wow, I think, well, we have 7. How about, let's do this. Let's, Danushka, why don't you send an email and engage with this person
That's
after.
Right.
Before, we only have a few minutes left.
Yeah, we have a lot of data. I mean, it's going to take a lot of time because we have a lot of products in the warehouse management stream. So we will get in touch with you, Kit Siri, to give you more details about the warehouse management systems and the tools.
What does TMS mean? TMS is transport management solution. So you have the warehouse management solution that manages the goods within the 4 walls, but then you have TMS or last mile or freight management system that manages the goods once they leave the 4 walls, outside of the 4 walls and on the road to the next point of delivery. Chinika, considering the level of investments, is there a possibility to develop a decision tree for selecting the appropriate level of intralogistics automation using ranges and SKUs, volumes, order sizes, cases, or unit pick? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would consider that quasi or seemingly AI or predictive, what we call predictive analytics or predictive allocation. So yes, that is a possibility. Danushka, you take it over.
How much of a role does the RPA plays in this scenario? Could you give some examples? So robotic process automation, you know, if I take I think I took this example at the my previous slide. Then you talk about the case study from the document digitalization in freight forwarding. So we run, we as a company, we run 36 RPA, the robots in our the RPA, the system, to analyze the data and retrieve the data and provide, do all the the system fillings and settlements and invoice issuing. So that is how the RPA is being used in our case. That is the RPA that we are using at the moment. That is how we use it. Anonymous.
You can go blockchain. Blockchain technology for contract document management system. Why blockchain? Why not e-signing software and integrations?
So why you go into the blockchain? So blockchain, the reason you go to the blockchain is the main reason is the security. That no one can change that data. Even if you do a single change into that data, the entire audit history of all the changes, who did it, when did it, and what time you did it, everything will be stamped on that. So that level of security and that power of retrieving the data and keeping it, you cannot get just by doing the storing it on a cloud or just by doing the software integration. So that is why, especially when it comes to manage documents in shipping, especially those are very sensitive data. You cannot play around with those data for anyone to weave it or retrieve it. So that is why the blockchain.
I'll throw another example in there. Documents can be forged. Here where Anonymous is. Sorry, documents can be forged. When we start looking at blockchain technologies and validations, there's a lot of scrutiny that goes from the end to end, right from source. So we look at diamonds or jewelry, for example. Diamonds within blockchain, they're able to do a full track and trace right back to the moment it was discovered. Without that sort of technology, and you have paper, pen and paper, e-signature, there's no validation, right? These things can be made up, whereas with blockchain, there's a full end-to-end security validation and encryption on the data. And the same goes for meat. We have a big market here for counterfeit meat. Sorry, let me explain that. In parts of Asia where Australian meat is exported, and a lot of meat now is labeled as Australian meat in parts of Asia when it's true it's not Australian meat. So blockchain technologies are being leveraged there to validate that the meat is in fact Australian and it comes from a viable source and it's been halal or humanely killed. Sorry. So there's different uses. Whereas if it was just an e-signature document, it's a signature on a piece of paper. There's no piece of paper. Sorry, there's no validation to the full history of that product.
That's right. So I think that's all the questions we have. I think, and we have come to the right timing. Is there any other questions that you can see the contact details and the email address, everything on the screen now? Reach us, send us an email. We are happy to help. We are happy to give more information about what we discussed, and even the areas that we even if it is a new area, we are happy to give you more details. Normally, the supply chain and the technological decisions by nature, if you take the context in this part of the world, it takes time. So you have to have a head start. So that's why you have to start something now. Give a thought about it. If you don't have these tools in place, it's time that you think about them, because this disruption, maybe not again. We don't want it to happen again, but there could be disruptions anytime. There can be anytime. So we have to be ready. So speak to us and we will give you more details on technology. Jamie, if you have any ending notes.
Listen, I want to thank everyone. We're 2 minutes after the hour, so I think we should let people go. As Danushka mentioned, if you want to learn more, feel free to reach out to him and the ITX360 team. With my collaboration and guidance, I'm sure we can certainly provide solutions and more information. We thank you all for attending, and I look forward to speaking to some of you further.
Thank you very much, all of you, for attending and taking your time to go through this discussion. And we hope that you learned some insights about the technology. And Jamie, thank you very much for joining us all the way from Australia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.